She wasn't snooping. That's the part Maya would keep coming back to, long after everything unraveled. She wasn't looking for anything. She was just standing in the kitchen, waiting for the pasta water to boil, when his phone lit up on the counter. One notification, a banking alert, and a number that made her forget she was holding a dish towel. $470,000 transferred out by her husband. A man who drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and packed a turkey sandwich for lunch every single day because, in his words, buying food at work was a waste of money. She stood there. The water started boiling behind her, and she thought, very quietly, in that still part of her mind where real fear lives, who is this man? Here is what Maya knew about Marcus Webb. He was a 7th grade history teacher at a mid-sized public school. He had been there for 6 years. He was well-liked, occasionally frustrated by bureaucracy, and completely devoted to a job that paid him like most teaching jobs pay, which is to say, not much. He drove a 2013 Civic, cracked dashboard vent, permanent coffee stain on the passenger seat. He was proud of that car in the way people are proud of things that have lasted. They had been married for 5 years, together for 6. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of the city, the kind of neighborhood where you knew your neighbors' names and parking was only sometimes a problem. Maya had loved all of it, the ordinariness of it, the realness. But now she stood in her kitchen, replaying that number on a loop, and the ordinary felt suddenly thin, like a coat of paint over something she hadn't seen yet. She told herself she had misread it. Of course she had. People misread screens. Digits blur. It was probably an alert from an old account, or a work account she didn't know about, or something perfectly boring and logical. She almost convinced herself. But the next morning, she started paying attention in a way she never had before, and once she started, she couldn't stop. Marcus used cash. Always. Not sometimes. Not usually. Always. Groceries, gas, coffee, restaurants. Cash. She had always filed it away as a quirk, something almost charming. Now she counted back through 5 years of it and felt something cold move through her. That was deliberate. That was someone who didn't want a record. He never worried about money, not once. Not when the refrigerator broke and the repair bill hit $800. Not when her freelance work slowed down for 2 months and she quietly, privately panicked about her share of the rent. He had just handled it, every time, calmly, without a single visible flicker of stress. She had called him good with money. Now she was wondering if that was even the right category. Then, 3 nights after she saw the notification, the phone call happened. He stepped out onto the balcony like he sometimes did, pulled the sliding door most of the way shut, faced away from the glass. She moved close to the curtain without thinking about whether that was reasonable, and she heard him say, "The quarterly figures are fine. Tell him to hold. Don't move anything until I give the word." A pause. "I'll handle the advisory side before the end of the month. Just keep it contained." Then the call ended. He came back inside, warm smile, kiss on the temple. "What do you want to watch tonight?" Maya smiled back. She said whatever he wanted was fine, and she stood there wondering what kind of history teacher had a quarterly figures conversation in the dark. She wasn't planning to look. She needed to remember that. One afternoon, Marcus was answering the front door, and he left his laptop open on the dining table. She sat down to move it. Then the screen pulled her in before she made the conscious choice to let it. A financial dashboard. A separate account. Nothing she had ever seen or had access to. Clean interface. Long column of transactions. Numbers that did not belong in their life. 6 figures. Multiple transfers. Going back months. And one name that appeared again and again in the notes column. Clearfield Advisory Group. She had never heard him say those words. Not once in 5 years. She stood up before he came back. That night, after midnight, sitting on the bathroom floor with the door locked, she searched for Clearfield Advisory Group. The website was minimal, deliberate. A contact form, a phone number, and nothing else. No staff names, no history, no photographs. The kind of company that exists specifically to be difficult to find. She searched deeper. She found it in an archived tech publication from 6 years ago, a short article about the acquisition of a startup called Origin Path, a productivity software platform sold to a larger technology firm for an amount described only as significant, believed to be in the tens of millions. Co-founders, James Yi and Marcus Allen Webb. Her husband's full name, in black and white, in a 6-year-old article about a company she had never heard of. She read it 4 times. Then she turned off her phone, sat in the dark, and stayed very still for a long time. 2 weeks later, a car appeared in front of their building that had no business being on their street. Dark Mercedes, new, polished to the kind of clean that communicated not cleanliness, but expense. It sat at the curb like a quiet announcement. Marcus had mentioned that morning that a former colleague was stopping by to drop something off. She hadn't thought much of it. She thought a great deal about it when she opened the door. The man standing there was mid-40s, lean, unhurried, dark suit, the kind without a visible label that announces itself anyway through the way it fits. He carried a slim leather briefcase. He had the particular stillness of someone who spent their days in rooms where very large decisions were made calmly. He said his name was Daniel Forsyth and shook Maya's hand. And she watched Marcus's face in the half-second before the greeting settled. It was fast. She almost missed it. A tightening around the jaw, a slight lift of the brow, the micro-expression of a man who had just realized something he hadn't planned for. Then it was gone, replaced by his easy, familiar smile. "Daniel, good to see you. Come in." The 2 men went into the bedroom. The door clicked shut. Maya stood in the hallway. After a moment, she moved close to the door. "The board approved the restructuring. The discretionary fund is fully intact." A pause. "The trust account stays exactly where it is. Nothing moves until you authorize it." Marcus's voice, quieter. "And the other matter?" She couldn't make out Forsyth's response. 15 minutes later, they came out, calm and unhurried, like men finishing any other meeting. Forsyth shook her hand again on his way out, brief, professional, like she was someone's assistant. After the Mercedes pulled away, Marcus turned to her with his hands in his pockets and told her that Daniel was an old contact helping him manage some inherited money from his grandfather's estate. He delivered it smoothly, enough detail to seem specific, vague enough to close down questions. She nodded. Said that made sense. She went to make tea, and her hands were perfectly steady, and inside her chest something had shifted into a position she didn't have a name for yet. That night she lay awake assembling the pieces she hadn't wanted to assemble. The transfer, the cash, the account, the phone calls, the company that didn't want to be found, the man in the Mercedes who talked about boards and discretionary funds. And the thought she kept trying to push away came back one more time and stayed. What if the money wasn't clean? She hated herself for it. This was Marcus, the man who remembered her mother's birthday every year, who stayed up with her when she was sick, who made her coffee exactly the way she liked it without being asked. But she had never had a reason to look before, and now that she was looking, she was seeing things that didn't fit. The word contained kept surfacing, the way he'd said it on the balcony, low and controlled, like someone managing a situation rather than having a conversation. She thought about the door closing, about Forsyth's briefcase, about the kind of money that required a company with no public profile to manage it quietly. And she realized something that frightened her more than any of the specifics. She didn't actually know what Marcus was capable of keeping secret. She had assumed she knew, but she had never tested the assumption. Now she wasn't sure the assumption had ever been solid. She gave herself 3 days. She did it methodically, without letting herself draw conclusions before she had the evidence to support them. Public business records confirmed the Origin Path Incorporation. Marcus was listed clearly as co-founder. She found the original filing, the registered agent, the corporate address, a shared workspace in the city 6 years ago. She found James Yee. His professional history confirmed he had moved into venture investing after Origin Path, consistent with someone who had walked away from a significant liquidity event. She found comparable acquisitions from that period and estimated ranges. She looked at what tens of millions actually meant in that context, and she built a number in her head, somewhere between $15 and $20 million. Her husband, the man with the cracked dashboard and the turkey sandwich. $15 to $20 million, sitting somewhere out of sight, managed by a company that didn't want to be found, looked after by a man who arrived in a Mercedes and talked about trust accounts. She closed every tab. She went and made dinner. She watched Marcus grade papers at the kitchen table that evening and listened to him complain, affectionately, about a student who had submitted an essay written entirely in bullet points. She laughed in the right places, and she decided that they were going to have a conversation tonight. Not tomorrow, not when she felt ready, tonight. She waited until he set down his pen and reached for his coffee. Then she sat across from him, folded her hands on the table, looked at him directly. "I need you to tell me the truth, Marcus. All of it. Right now." He went completely still. Not startled, not defensive. Still, in the particular way of someone who has been quietly dreading a specific moment and has just watched it arrive. He set his coffee cup down very carefully. "How much do you know?" She told him. Everything. The banking notification, the Clearfield account, Origin Path, the incorporation documents, Daniel Forsyth, the conversations on the balcony. She laid it out without rushing, without raising her voice, without giving him room to redirect. He didn't interrupt once. When she finished, the apartment was completely quiet. He looked at the table, then back at her. "It's legal, Maya. Every dollar. I need you to know that before anything else." "Then tell me what it is," she said. "All of it." He talked for a long time. Origin Path had started in a shared apartment with almost no money. He and James had worked on it for 4 years, surviving on very little, running on the belief that it would eventually work. Then a company made an offer. Lawyers, negotiations, months of careful, exhausting back and forth. They sold. Marcus's share was $18 million. He was 29 years old. The silence after he said the number was different from all the other silences in that conversation. "What happened after?" she asked quietly. He looked at his hands. Everything changed. Everyone changed. Old friends reappeared with pitches and ideas. Family he barely knew reached out suddenly. Relationships that had felt solid shifted, subtly sometimes, but always. He became something to people, a resource, an opportunity. He watched it happen in real time and couldn't find the way back to what had been real. He hired Forsyth to manage the money through Clearfield, quietly, professionally, completely out of sight. And then he made a decision. He wanted to find out what his life actually was when money wasn't part of the equation. He took his teaching certificate off the shelf, found a school, found an apartment, drove the Civic, lived like the person he had been before any of it happened. "And then," he said, "I met you." He looked up at her. "And every month I told myself I was going to tell you. And every month I couldn't figure out how to do it without changing everything. Because what we had was the first thing in years that felt completely real." Maya didn't say anything for a long time. She wasn't crying. She had expected to cry. Instead, she sat there in the quiet of a life she had built on a foundation she hadn't known was there, and tried to locate what she was actually feeling. He hadn't hidden crime. She believed that now. He had hidden himself, or rather, a version of himself he hadn't trusted her with. And she understood the fear behind it, even now, even sitting across from it. She understood what it meant to have the world show you, clearly and repeatedly, that people could not be trusted with knowledge of what you had. She understood it. But understanding it didn't make it small. He had looked at her every single day for 5 years and chosen not to tell her. He had let her make decisions about work, about money, about their future. inside a version of their life that had never been entirely true. That wasn't a small thing. That was enormous. "I need time," she said. He nodded. He didn't push. She believed he meant it. She believed he loved her. She believed, when she examined it honestly, that she still loved him. But that night, sitting alone in the living room long after he had gone to bed, she turned over the question she couldn't set aside. How do you fully trust someone again, when you know they looked at you day after day and made the choice to keep something this big out of sight? She didn't have an answer. The Honda Civic is still in the garage. He still packs his lunch every morning. But some days, Maya looks at him across the kitchen table and feels it, quiet and unresolved. The distance between the man she thought she knew and the man she is still learning he is. So I want to know what you think, because this one isn't simple. Marcus didn't hide anything illegal. He hid wealth, because he had been burned, because he wanted something real, because he needed to know the difference between someone who loved him and someone who loved what he had. And by that measure, it worked. Maya loved him completely before she ever knew a dollar existed. But he also made a choice, every single day for 5 years, to keep something enormous from the person he chose to build a life with. So here's the question. Was that self-protection, or was it betrayal dressed up in good intentions? And if you were sitting across that kitchen table, could you come back from that? Leave your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one, and this is exactly the kind of story where the comments go somewhere unexpected. And if you want more stories like this, real situations, impossible questions, endings that stay with you, make sure you're subscribed. New story every single week. Don't miss it.